Ray DeCruz from Performance Leader discussing after action reviews. You've got some software that's going to do this?
Hi everyone, my name's Ray DeCruz. I'm one of the many Australians here in the room today. And it's been a while since I've been in Dallas. I come to America quite often because I've got family here. But it's about 25 years since I was in Dallas when I was a university student after participating in a debating competition over here where I had the privilege of being a judge and knocking Ted Cruz out of the competition. So it's nice to be in Texas. But look, you'd be pleased to know that back then Ted was extremely serious, didn't have a sense of humour, took himself really seriously, didn't have a lot of friends, so obviously nothing's really changed. That's as political as I'll get. My background is as a lawyer. I was a lawyer straight after university. I didn't last very long. I don't think I was a very good one. And I moved into the learning and development group of the firm. I was working for a large firm in Australia that's now part of a large international firm. And I remember the first day that I was in that new learning role, the then managing partner, who's a good friend of John Chisholm's, walked into my office. That was remarkable in and of itself. Sat down and said to me, now that you're no longer a lawyer, you need to know that if you try 3 things and only one works, that's okay. I've got your back. And that was 18 years ago, 19 years ago. Incredibly progressive managing partner. To Ed's question earlier, my hero, certainly in a professional sense. And I guess that background or backdrop of risk is a really interesting issue when it comes to after-action reviews, what I'm here to talk about today. Because the logic of after-action reviews is unarguable. You just can't have a good argument against after-action reviews. And the argument that was strong 15 years ago is even stronger today with the more for less culture in this environment. And so I think it is a real challenge, and it is very interesting to actually get under the I would say bonnet, but I guess you'll say hood, to see why it is that professional service firms really struggle within their culture to make after-action reviews a thing. Now, our business is Performance Leader, is called Performance Leader, and we've been implementing performance, feedback and learning software for about 10 years, mainly in law firms. 60% of our clients are law firms, the rest from other professional services. And introducing, you can introduce all sorts of new software into this field, particularly at the moment with a lot of the debate going around performance management. So firms are completely up for feedback now tools, in the moment, non-hierarchical feedback. They're over the line on objectives and objective tracking and aligning objectives to broader strategic goals. But getting firms to cross the line into the after-action review area is difficult. And I know this because we've been putting our software out there for about 8 months to our existing clients, and we've only had a handful of adopters, a couple of law firms and a couple of accounting firms. And so that for us is really interesting, okay, that there's so much reticence around this particular issue. Before I get into actually showing you the software, hands up if you know what an after-action review is. Nice and high. Okay, pretty much everyone in the room. So structured debrief, what worked, what didn't work. I'm amongst friends in this group, I know, because Ron and Ed have been talking about this for years. Okay. Hands up if you, in your organisation, you've run an after-action review in the last 6 or 12 months. Okay, that's great too. I was at a conference of learning professionals, law firm learning professionals, a few weeks ago, a bigger audience, not one hand went up. Not one hand. So I'm clearly amongst friends here. Okay, so what I'm going to show you is the software that we've developed. The software is either standalone or integrated within our existing suite of performance and feedback products. It's going to be a very quick demonstration because the software is simple, as it should be. So if you look up on the screen, you can see that I've got my project's landing page. So what's happened in this instance is a firm will have selected the software, will have sat down with them, will have consulted around what specific needs they have. The traditional after-action review questions of what was supposed to happen, what actually happened, why, so the analysis, and then finally, what are we going to do differently next time, or what did we learn from this? Those questions are the core questions. We encourage firms to stick to the core as much as they can, but over and above that, we also encourage them to explore questions, quantitative or qualitative, that will work for their particular firm. So, for example, we've got a firm that likes to ask the question, what did you learn from this engagement that you could apply to another client or another industry? Fantastic question. A question that the big accounting firms are very good at asking, but most others simply don't ask. A wonderful business development tool. For others, they might want to ask specific questions around how the project ran to time or budget, the two traditional constraints around a project. So over and above the standard after-action review questions, we really do try to encourage them to consider what might be appropriate for their firm. So this is a mythical firm, Smith & Jones, as you might have guessed. And what I'll do now is I'll just click on this little plus button over here, which signifies a new project. So I'll click on that. You can see here that we're moving between the words projects and job. That's probably because an accounting firm has been in here, or an audit group has been in here playing around with this demo. But the person who's setting up the project, which doesn't have to be the project leader, in fact, in many instances it's better if it's not the project leader for reasons which... there's a fantastic podcast that Ron and Ed have done on this subject. So given that I have such limited time, it's a really good introduction to AARs, and I encourage you to get onto their website to listen to it. It'll give you a lot more of the background, and you'll even hear about how Ed runs these things at his dinner table with his kids. So, true story, right? Yeah. So the project reviewer would come in here, talk about the job name, select a job type. All of this is customizable and broadly relates to the reporting that you want at the end of the project. Describe the project briefly. If there's a client name, add in project team members, add myself in. We can have multiple project leaders, or we can assign project leadership to others. So you could have someone in the organisation who's responsible for setting them up, but isn't actually responsible for conducting them. Start and end dates. Firms can set their own tags. Again, this largely then feeds into the reporting. Things can be private or public. A significant driver of this tool is the knowledge management outcome. For new employees in particular, starting work with a client that might have been a client of the firm's for 10 years, they'll be able to come on here and look at all the projects that the firm has run with that client and all the significant learning that came out of it. It's really invaluable material, and there's really no one person in the firm, no matter how closely they are over the client, who could have the time or scope to provide that kind of background to a new employee. And then finally, we've got our after-action review questions. The first one typically is set up at the start. We had a really interesting discussion with Andrew and Hugh. I'm sure you don't mind me mentioning this, but with Andrew and Hugh's managing partner, they're starting to pilot the software, who was talking about the importance of aligning that project objective text with the text in the engagement letter. Effectively saying this should be a cut and paste. And to the extent that it can't be, I think if I'm paraphrasing him correctly, he's saying the engagement letter's wrong. So we've got to create a little bit of a feedback loop here and make sure that that part of the process is right. Once the project's set up, then there are two distinct elements to it. So here we have one that I've set up earlier, and this is the project team leader's view. You can see our after-action review questions down the left. You can see over here we've got something called team feedback. So team feedback can have two dimensions to it. It can both allow the team member to provide feedback on the project itself, what worked, what didn't work, and often it's better not to ask them the exact after-action review questions, but ask them some simpler alternative questions. There are various reasons for that, which I won't go into now. But the second option is that the project team member can talk about their personal contribution to this project. And when you think about some of the debate going on about performance management at the moment, one of the big problems is that we're not collecting feedback as we go. So we're not talking about ratings or anything like that here. We're just talking about collecting a snippet from the person about the work they've just done that we can then bring into a career conversation down the track. Once the team members have completed their submissions, then we meet and the project leader can come back and fill out those remaining text boxes, or whoever the scribe is, and mark the project as complete. There's some very tangible outcomes from this. The first is that there is a searchable tool that anyone in the organisation can use for all of those projects that have been deemed public projects. They only see the after-action review content, they don't see the personal reflection. Secondly, management has access to more detailed reporting using the tags. So those tags can be client tags, they can be issue tags. If there's a pricing or a scoping challenge that the firm is facing, that would be an obvious tag, for example. And finally, the output of this can be brought into periodic conversations, reflections, career conversations, and so on. So that's the product. The act of engaging in an after-action review is in and of itself valuable. You don't need the software for this to be valuable. Prior to the software, we've been doing them on a single sheet of paper, sharing that with our clients. And I haven't really mentioned the client dimension here, but there is a client option where clients can have feedback sought as well. I've got about a minute left. So I've given you a little bit of background about us and about the product. I've shown you the product. I guess the final thing to close on is this cultural challenge, because we know that professional service firms are inherently hierarchical. I know I'm talking to leaders of firms in this room that are non-hierarchical, but we know that in any organisation where hierarchy is a strong part of the culture, that these sorts of processes struggle. And so the role of the leader in demonstrating learning and openness to learning and their own vulnerability, and the role of the leader in distinguishing types of failure becomes really important. There's a fantastic article in Harvard Business Review that I can provide you for the reference later, where there's a continuum of failure, starting at one end of the spectrum with ethical failure, which clearly has to be dealt with. But at the other end is experimental failure, where we're throwing up ideas and hypotheses, and in many ways after action reviews fits into that category. So it's, as a leader, it's something really worth encouraging.
All right. Thank you so much, Ray.